then. We had, I think we'd grown with the industry, the economy, the whole world, where we really had flattened a lot of those cycles. We had we had the CEO of American making statements that we'll never lose money again. Well, people got to learn to quit saying that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's just inescapable at some point that there will be the ups and downs. I was working for a travel club when I got furloughed. It was actually kind of humorous, where director of ops said, "We got to talk." I said, "What about?" "Well, we're going to cut back operations some." "Well, that's great." He goes, "Yeah, we're going to have to furlough some crews." I go, "That's great, but we only have one crew." "Yeah, we got to talk." So, it is unfortunately part of the industry. I used to joke that the ATP written ought to have questions about wiring schedule and use of lumber and bracing, because at some point you're going to pick up a hammer and swing it to earn a living. And if you're working for an airline or any kind of certified ops, you're going to go through their training and their certification and testing. ATP had very little, the FAA tickets had very little to do with it. I don't want to be discouraging that, because the upside is you find something, and you'll have life experiences that you take forward and you grow with. I mean, I ended up flying cattle, but I was flying a 4-engine jet flying cattle. That's all that mattered. I was living, in a $200 a month flop house, basically, of an apartment, but I didn't care. We all have, I was lucky I didn't have a lot of luggage to tote along with me, literally or figuratively. I think there are a couple of things I learned along the way. Most people on their way up at some point are going to be asked to compromise. And you have to decide personally what your levels of compromise are. And you also have to be alive to spend it. And
compromise in what respect?
People might ask you to fly when you don't feel like flying. Okay. Fly when the definition of when you can fly might be a little bit in question.
Is that from before, or is that as recent as now?
That was before. That was getting there.
Okay.
I boast to people that I'm very happy to know that I am flying for a company that will fire me for taking a broken airplane. But that was not always the case.
Gotcha.
And in fact, when I got hired at American, this is 1985, I had captains whose kids were getting into aviation, and they asked for my advice. And at the time, I reached in my back pocket and I pulled out a little blue wallet that had about $1,500 in traveler's checks. Google what a traveler's check is. Anyway, and I said, you give them this, because at some point they're going to be asked to compromise, and the answer is going to be no. And with $1,500 in your back pocket, you can start your way home, or you can get food and shelter until someone can get you an airline ticket home.
Gotcha.
But you got to be alive to spend it.
Yeah.
You also got to be alive to starve to death.
Yeah. So okay, that's an interesting way to put it.
Zane, it's a matter of integrity.
Yeah.
It's a matter of integrity and perseverance. It's really what airlines come down to. It's also something Bob Hoover brings to the table. If you look at his story, it's one of perseverance, and it's definitely one of integrity. So it's one of the things I liked about getting involved with the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation is it brings those things out. And aviation is an amazing media. It doesn't care who you are, what your background is, or what your culture is. There's certain truisms involving gravity and velocity that are inescapable. And those truths aren't going to be bent to anyone's culture or political will or anything else. They're very, very true. And that's why you can find people from all corners of the earth, even adversarial pilots. People in the Russian Air Force have a lot in common with people in the U.S. Air Force.
Very true.
When they get together and have a beer, they find they have so much in common. It's really amazing.
And in talking about that and talking about Bob Hoover, in the stories that have been told in books written about him and the documentaries and that type of thing, he actually had mutual admiration for pilots, enemy pilots that he fought against and flew against. And actually had an opportunity or two to meet a couple of them after the war and everything. And they still had that mutual respect. It was like, yeah, I was doing what I'm supposed to do for my country and you for yours, but you're one heck of a pilot, you know, or and that
Yeah.
type of thing. So, and I think you bring up a great point, because the camaraderie within the aviation community is actually an amazing thing in itself. So I'm
We
gonna move
we
on
have one of
to.
the. Let
Go
me
ahead.
throw one last thing in. We have the last fully accountable jobs on Earth. We either do it right or we don't go home. The Earth and
Yeah,
the sky don't care.
that's definitely one way to put
Yeah.
it.
Or
So
I mean, it's a very macho way of saying it. I will, I'll semi
yeah,
apologize for that. I guess ordnance disposal workers have the same parameters, but there really isn't. There's no rolling it into the next quarter. It's not an inherently dangerous occupation, but at the
yeah,
same time, if you're totally passive, you will come to grief. And in that, it's a good parallel for life.
sure.
You can have other people suggesting things, but you have to decide and you have to act.
Point well taken. I was going to ask you, Zane. You had a little bit different path in the business aviation world versus airline. How did that come about? How did you end up doing what you're doing now and have been doing for a number of years?
Sure. I've never been an airline pilot. I wasn't in the military, but flying is all I ever wanted to do. My mother says I didn't make a very good Little League baseball player because I was busy in the outfield watching airplanes instead of fly balls. And so it's all I want to do. I grew up in a very small rural area of Central Florida, but I started flying in high school. I actually got my private pilot's license in high school, and then went on to Embry-Riddle. We didn't have the instant social media and internet then, so of course you had to dig a little deeper to find opportunities. And everybody just talked about airlines and seemed to know. So my dad had discouraged me from trying to be a pilot because he had friends and knew people that it was a cycle where airlines were furloughing, and he convinced me to start college at Embry-Riddle in aeronautical engineering. And I started in a summer term, and I was miserable. And I went home and told him I'm failing calculus. I couldn't even spell it, and I want to be a pilot. I think my first experience out of school, and it was just the path that led me what I'm doing, is I got exposed to some corporate aviation early when I was flight instructing, and at the job where I was, they were flying an old Saberliner, a couple of Saberliners, and I got to fly as a co-pilot, and that fit my personality. I think I'm a people person. And so I like to know what's going on with my company. I like to have a relationship with the people that are in the back of the airplane, more so than just greeting them at the door, I guess. And so I ended up, I've only had a few jobs in my career. I've been in aviation now for 40 years. So if you count when I started flying, over 40 years, I guess. And I've only had a few jobs. And my current job, I've been here 27 years, which is sometimes an anomaly for a corporate flying job. But I've landed at a good company with solid leadership at the company that views airplanes not as a toy. They don't view airplanes as a luxury for just flying senior executives. They're viewed as a piece of equipment that we use in the furtherance of our business, just like we use equipment to get chickens from the chicken house into the plant, or just like we use machinery in our plant. We use airplanes for the furtherance of our business. And to some of the other things that were said about integrity and compromise, I'll echo that to you young guys of, don't don't compromise yourself. Set some standards. And one of the things, at least I think, when some of us older guys were coming up and things weren't quite as regulated is not the word, but it was a little more cowboyish sometimes, that I've actually heard, people would say, well, if you can't do this or won't do this, there are plenty of people that will. And, unfortunately, there are other professions that you get your education and you get your degree and you get your credentials and you go out and hang your shingle and you start work. And in aviation, getting your degree and getting your licenses is really now your license to learn. And it takes experience. It takes time in the cockpit. It takes time to learn, and before you're insurable, before people will start, before you can be a pilot in command. And so it sometimes gets to be a race for building that flight time, and people can be talked into sometimes putting yourself in a situation maybe you don't want to be. So I hear people say for us, well, safety is our number one priority. Well, no, it's not. Getting our people from point A to point B in the safest manner possible is our priority. If safety was our number one priority, I think we'd keep the airplane in the hangar and keep the doors closed. So our number one priority is getting our passengers where they need to be, when they need to be there, in the safest, most efficient manner that we can. And that's our job as the pilot or the flight attendant or the maintenance people, to make sure that happens. So I've been lucky. My company supports that 100%. And it's not the career path, I think, in aviation that I had nailed down from day one, but it's one that evolved for me, and it's one that I'm very happy with. And I don't think I would trade it.
So your operation is unique to a number of corporate operations, and some of the Fortune 500 companies with what you guys do. Can you tell us a little bit about your daily and weekly mission with your aircraft, and who you fly and how you do it?
Sure. We don't, you don't build a chicken plant in a major metropolitan area. They tend to be rural. Our headquarters, I'm in Laurel, Mississippi, and the closest viable commercial airports to us there are two, and they're different directions, and they're an hour and a half drive away. So some of our plants, literally, for people to get there, they could drive the 8 or 9 hours in a car quicker than they can do the airline trip. By the time you drive to the airport, get there an hour early, you have to go to Atlanta or Dallas and connect. And it's so what we do is a lot of our airplanes will launch at 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning at our hangar. It's not uncommon for us to have 40 or 50 people at our facility, at our hangar facility in the morning. We launch out airplanes going to our facilities where we have operations, and we have everybody on board, sometimes from maybe a truck driver that needs to bring a truck back from there. We may have the president of the company on the plane. We have mostly mid-level people. Very seldom do we have upper management on our airplane. So 60% or so of our flying is in support of just company day-to-day operations. Of course, we fly customers. We bring customers into our facilities to see their product running, to see what we do, to see how we run our operation. They may need to bring people in for a quality control audit, those sorts of things. We fly humanitarian flights. That's always in the news for corporate aviation, and we provide seats on our airplanes for people that may be traveling to a hospital or for cancer treatments, things like that. So it's not scheduled. It's not like an airline where we know, a pilot knows way out in advance. They bid a schedule a month in advance or so. We are unique in that we give our pilots so many guaranteed hard days off every month, and they know those a year in. They do know those days a year in advance, and they can plan out around that. But it's all domestic U.S. Our flights are we average about an hour stage length per flight. And our guys are home most every night. That's a big draw here for our pilots is they work hard, they fly a lot. Our average pilot's flying about 500 hours a year, which is a lot for a corporate flight department.
That's a busy flight department.
But they're home almost every night. They're home sleeping in their own bed. So that's a big draw for guys.
Wow. So Matthew and Otto in particular, you guys you're seniors at Embry-Riddle and Prescott, finishing up your education and flight training, and you've heard from both the airline side and the corporate side. So what kind of thoughts are you having, or questions or comments about what you've heard so far?
Well, I've been interested in corporate my whole life, basically. My dad flew corporate as well as cargo and airlines. So I've kind of got to hear a lot about each of them from him. And I've always wanted to do corporate based on like I said before, the closer relationship with who you're flying, who you're working for. And, the schedule might vary a little more than airlines, but I think at a younger age, that would be totally fine for being on the move all the time. I think that would be cool. And maybe eventually move into cargo and just kind of see where it goes, start flying bigger airplanes maybe, and just kind of get a feel for everything.
So you have flying in your blood. Your dad and I believe you said your grandfather also.
Yeah, my grandfather flew in the Air Force and had his own private airplanes, as well as my dad. So
you've grown up in aviation.
Yeah, definitely.
And you want to continue that legacy.
Yep, I've always wanted to follow in their footsteps, and it's always what I wanted to do.
That's awesome. Matthew, how about you?
Well, for me, it's kind of an interesting story. So last summer, I actually entered at an airline, got a little bit more experience in, the corporate world, not corporate aviation. It was, 121 carrier. And it was kind of cool to see all the different teams that work together to make an airline work and actually see what the insides look like and how that works. But I also like to stay open. I don't want to say that I want to go straight to the airlines. I don't want to say if I want to go to the airlines directly. I kind of wanted to keep my options available for if any opportunities come up, because I know like corporate aviation, a lot of times it's something that you don't really pursue. It pursues you. You find a company finds you that you with that reputation, maybe even that networking that you have with those people that you know. I guess something that I could actually ask maybe Tamara or Zane is how do you find a pilot that's set aside, or how do you find a pilot that is set apart from other pilots that would be something that you would look for in like corporate aviation or in your realm of work you're working in?
I will say, and I don't want this to sound cavalier, but every once in a while, I remember when I was at Embry-Riddle, every once in a while you get the guy that forgets to take his Ray-Bans off when he's in class. He's got that cool I'm a pilot factor, and while it's a special profession, it's we love to do it, and it's hard work, and it takes perseverance. If somebody gets a little too big for their britches, I guess I remind some of my guys sometimes that the first people to fly spaceships were monkeys and German shepherds. So on some level you can teach people how to do it, but you can't change a person's personality. And this is in no way a knock on airline aviation, but I think that in some ways personality is a bigger factor for a corporate pilot, because you interact face to face with senior leadership in your company. You interact face to face with the CEO, with all these people, and it takes some personality. So to me, by the time somebody gets the requirements to come to work for me, and we've said at our company, it's, you have to have your ATP, you have to have X number of thousands of hours of flight time and multi-engine time and those things. And I do some checks on you, and I see that you know what you're doing. By the time you get to that level, you've proven that you know what you're doing. And what I'm looking for now is your personality. Are you going to fit with my company? Are you going to fit with the way that we work and the way that we have to fly? And another part is location. Again, I'm in rural Mississippi, so honestly, I have a couple of guys that work for me, both in maintenance and pilots that are Embry-Riddle graduates. But I also have a large contingent here in our state. We have a school, Delta State, here in Mississippi, that has a commercial aviation program. So I have a number of guys that are from there. So we also look for, why would you want to be in Mississippi? So a lot of my guys have ties here. They have ties to this state or this part of the country. They may have family around and they want to stay. If I get a resume from a guy from Southern California who's 35 years old and he's got 10 type ratings already, I kind of know what's going on there. He's going to come to me to get a G280 type rating, and in a little while he's going to be gone somewhere else. So those are the things that we look for. Once you get beyond the basic technical requirements, is your aptitude to work with us, your personality.
So one of the questions, I think they bring up a great point, by the way. I've talked with a number of directors of flight departments like yourself, and that's generally what they say in terms of new hires. They're looking for somebody personality-wise that fits. They can meet all the qualifications, have the type ratings, et cetera, but it's more of fitting the team and fitting the culture of the company, et cetera, and so forth. So I think that's a great point that you share with everybody. But one of the questions, and this is not to put you on the spot, Zane, but I hear this all the time about the challenges of breaking into corporate aviation or business aviation coming fresh out of school. What thoughts do you have about that? What recommendations do you have for these seniors that are getting ready to graduate, or those who are watching?
That is tough. I mean, because for most corporate flight departments, I think, like mine, the hiring requirements as far as flight time are going to be higher maybe than they are, say, at a regional airline. Even though those have increased, with the new regulations in the last few years. A lot of it, we've had some guys with low time that have just made connections with us, either through an internship or through just being from the area. And you stay in touch with those guys. We have a fellow that I know that was from this area, and he did that. And we told him, look, at that time, your goal, you've got to get multi-engine time and you've got to get turbine time. And what's the best way right now? Now, this was pre-COVID. What's the best way to do that? Is just bite the bullet and go to a regional airline. Even if you don't think you want to be an airline pilot, that's a quick way to get, within a couple of years, to get quality multi-engine turbine time, but also to learn to work in a crew environment, to learn cockpit resource management, to learn all of those things. So I'm going to say we've gone both ways. I have had pilots over the years that have left me and gone to major airlines. I have some guys that I still keep in touch with all the time that have gone to Federal Express. That's just a few hours drive from us. So I've had guys go to both FedEx mainline. I've had guys go into their corporate flight department at FedEx. But I've also got probably half a dozen pilots that are former airline pilots, and they've come the other direction. The airline just didn't work for them. They didn't like that kind of schedule environment, whatever. It's, again, it's a different stroke for different folks, and they found a home here. They've come the other direction and they like it better here. So, right now, everything is so up in the air with coronavirus that I don't know what those answers, when Stephen and I were younger, the ways that guys would build flight time would be you flew checks, again, at Google, what's a check, right? So, that was a lot. Everybody flew checks around at night and things like that to build time. That those opportunities aren't really there anymore. I really feel like flight instructing is a valuable occupation when you're starting out. I think I learned more in the first 6 months of being a flight instructor than I had learned up to that time about aviation. When I teach it to somebody else, it gives you a great background and a baseline to build on.
Sure.
Actually,
I
I'm
think
sorry, Vince.
Go
Can I-
ahead, Tamara.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
add a little to this?
Yes, please.
To Matthew's question, I will
Yes.
tell you, it's get attention to detail first. But when I was looking to get out at 10 years from the Air Force, because that's always the mark, and I knew nothing about the corporate world. And for you, Jan, like with Delta, 9/11 happened. And I was like, oh, I better stick where I'm at because it's not a good time. So I always believe when one door closes, 10 more doors open. So there's always going to be 10 more opportunities that you didn't know about to keep it on a positive thought. But in the corporate world, to me, it's like sales. You're the person, you're the product. So when you're doing that, when I see a good pilot, I'm with Zane, it is your personality. And to me, good pilots, you can land a plane perfectly, but if you cannot communicate with your crew, and that's, your crew resource management, you see your CRM, you're not a good pilot. If you can't ask how people are doing or anything else, what good are you? Because that's when safety comes into it. But attention to detail. When I see someone and you can't, iron your shirt or anything, because it's always attention. I mean, that was taught to us in the military, and anything on the plane. I will tell you, one time we had to do a crew swap on an aircraft. Attention to detail, because we didn't want to tell the press right away. We took pictures of how their seats were so we could replicate it on the other aircraft to make sure we'd done it. Now, we did let them know because we figured they'd check the tail number, but we told the president first. But that attention to detail, no one had known that we had done it, because we told the president first, and then he goes, yes, go ahead and tell the press. So it's always attention to detail. Well, definitely as basic as when I teach at the school protocol and etiquette, when you go to dinner, that's still your interview. If you can't eat properly and that you just interview thinking, oh, I've got this job. No, how you eat can affect everything. So.
No,
yes,
that's great input on that. What I was going to do is I was going to ask Jan. Jan, you have an impressive background with coming out of school and going right into flying. With what we're talking about today, how did you manage that path? Because I mean, you went to several different operations and finally got to Delta, which I would gather would be an operation you're happy to be at in terms of the size of the airline, et cetera, and so forth. But you had a path going there. Can you share that with us about what your thought process was and how you did that?
Yeah, and I was actually thinking of this when Matthew was speaking, and about an interest in corporate aviation as well as the airlines, because that's exactly the position I found myself in when I graduated from Embry-Riddle. And so I was fortunate to find a low time opportunity. I got hired at Tradewind Aviation with about 600 hours, and I bridged the gap between about the 250 hours that I finished my flight training with, and those 600 hours with a friend of mine and I. We owned an old 1969 Piper Cherokee, so we flew that all around the U.S. So that in and of itself was a great experience that helped me get the time I needed to be able to start at that corporate operation, or I'm sorry, that Part 135 operation. But I think that just realizing that you don't always have to do the route that most people do, which is getting your flight training, getting your certified flight instructor, your CFI, and then instructing until you get the flight time to go to a regional airline and proceeding from there, I think opens up so many more options for you. If sure, you might need to get your CFI to instruct for a little bit to get some hours, or find another way. But if you can find a job that'll hire you with 250 hours, I think it's invaluable. to have the opportunity to try something new. I know even if it's something like aerial surveying or just small cargo operation,
Banner flying.
yeah, they all really open your eyes to you get to talk to so many people who have forged a different path. And so that's what I found when I was at Tradewind Aviation, the Part 135 operation. It really opened my eyes to so many different possibilities, and it did solidify that my sentiment that I did want to end up at the airline, just from a schedule perspective and from an opportunity, really the opportunity to go where you want, whether different bases and all that. You're not locked into one place, and that's what attracted me to it. And I think it really made my mind up when I went to be able to see both sides. But kind of like what Zane was saying, you kind of sometimes do have to go to the regional airlines to build the experience to go corporate. And I think that's a good thing almost, because it lets you see, okay, this definitely isn't for me. Or, hey, maybe I do like the airlines more than I thought I would. So you get to kind of see if the corporate side's right for you, or if the airlines are something you'd like more. But yeah, I mean, all I would recommend is just to kind of try and break that mold of staying at CFI until you go to the regionals, and try and experiment with another part of the aviation industry, because there's just so many jobs out there, so many opportunities to try.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Did somebody else want to chime in about that?
Well, we talk about pilots a lot here, but people that are watching this, remember there are a lot of other people in aviation. There are maintenance people, flight attendants, there are baggage handlers, there are ground marshalers, there are schedulers, dispatchers, weather people. There are a lot of other functions that go along with that. Now, you guys remember in corporate aviation, if Stephen lined up all the people that helped him get his airplane moving, there'd just be a whole panel back behind him. I'm a larger flight department, so I do have a little more resource than a lot out there. But in most places, when you're flying a corporate jet, and especially if it's a private individual or a small company, you can fit them all on one screen, because it's going to be you. You're going to be the baggage handler. You're going to be the weatherman. You're going to be the flight attendant. You're going to be the everything, and that's okay. That's okay. That fits a lot of people's personality and what they want to do. But remember, it's hard work. All of it is hard work. We love what we're doing, but you get there. And I'll go back what you said when you get some of these the places and your low time. And one of the fortunate things I think for me is my company doesn't make money with airplanes per se. We're not a profit center aviation. Some of these things Steve and I were talking about earlier with integrity and things go with, a lot of companies that their airplanes are how they make money. Then there's more pressure to fly, to do things. It's tough in my job when you have to tell your CEO, we're not going to take you there. I've had several times over the years with CEO of my company when he's wanted to go somewhere at an airport, and I've researched that, and I said, we're not going to go there. There's this other place. It's just a few miles down the road or whatever. And he says, well, they told me other jets land there. Well, I understand that, but we're not going to. And you know what? A lot of people, I think in corporate aviation, especially starting out, they're afraid to tell the boss that. They're afraid to tell the boss, no, we're not going to do that. And because they think, well, it's his airplane. He's paying my salary. I need to say these things. So remember, guys, when you're out there and starting out, that a lot of these people are they're trusting you. And I think until you stand up and say no, they assume that it's okay. And you have to justify that. You have to have a professional reason why we don't need to be doing this. But those are things that you're going to encounter in corporate aviation, maybe that are different in airline type flying.
I think that those are great points that you bring up about that, Zane. Tamara, I was going to come back to you and piggybacking a little bit off of what Zane was saying. about the team, about that there are so many different facets of flying beyond what the pilot does to the maintenance, et cetera, and so forth. You've had a lot of experience with that. Do you want to share a little bit about a little of your insight on that?
Sure. So working as a team, that's what gets any trip successful. I tease the pilots a lot. I say, this trip's gonna make it, whether you always land perfectly, but it's the personality between the maintenance getting us off. But you know, my contact with, if I'm smiling at the passengers and they get off happily, then it's good. But nothing's successful on our own. We have to do it together, right? So we trust our maintenance guys that everything's safe, and I trust you guys that you get the plane going. But we have to work together. We have to understand our positions and kind of what our jobs are. So what I would tell you guys coming in, ask about their jobs and learn what they do besides, I'm just the pilot, I fly, I don't care what else they're doing, because you want to have an understanding of what's going on outside of your perception of just what's in the flight deck, because that's what is going to keep it cohesive and making the trip successful every single time. It's when, even for Zane, like if a maintenance issue, and like for us, anytime we had a cruise or, swap planes for maintenance issues, we did it as a group. Everyone pitched in. I can tell you now from years of having to load bags, I'm very good at loading bags on a Gulfstream, and I'm teaching pilots how to load bags, because I'm like, you're killing me, because that's not, they're like, we just put it on the couch, it'll be okay. And I'm like, no, I have to make beds. Let me show you a good trick. But it's building that communication and that teamwork. And especially if you do contracting, you'll get a lot of experience versus just going to work. And it's going to be good and bad experience, but you just go in, I'm going in to get that experience, because some accounts are like, this is how we do it, just keep quiet and do it. Or some are, you got to go in with confidence and go, let me help you, because this is going to help, but do it present it in a way that, they're confident that you are really helping them. But it's learning the different procedures and being able to communicate and work together. Definitely, if you can do contract, it'll open your eyes to so many things. But it's always having to work as a team, because if you're not, it's that communication that'll hurt in the end.
So not to move into anything really super controversial, but I wanted to take advantage of having you here, Tamara, and ask you, as a female in the industry, and you've been in the Air Force, you've worked corporate, so you've kind of seen it all. And there's a lot of talk about the lack of diversification, and in your case, that would be gender diversification. What's your observations about that? Maybe, what are some of the challenges that you think still exist in that arena?
Definitely I've seen it improve for like female pilots working as what we call the SAM, or distinguished visitor, working for special missions on your Gulfstreams and your Boeing aircraft. Doing that. There are limited female pilots out there. They're tough. Other pilots, when they do their check rides and all that, they're tougher on them, but they go in, these female pilots go in going, I got this. It's gotten better over the years. You're seeing more female pilots now than when I first started flying in 95. On the corporate side, I'm seeing a lot of more female pilots out there. I will say, like on the flight attendant side, they always say, oh, flight attendants, they're a drama all the time, and that's really not the truth. Honestly, if all of us flight attendants talked about work and who we're flying, what we're doing, we could rule the world. because we were very private about who we're flying and what we're doing, that when we do go, oh, I was in Kansas. Oh, I was in Kansas. And we don't talk about who we're flying or anything. But then when we realize, we're like, oh, that's what was going on. We could have ruled the world then. And it's not really a lot of drama. We communicate a lot better. And some pilots who do know us, they're like, oh, we need this or that. And we stay in touch a lot better than that. But no, it's getting better than
Good to
it
hear.
was in the past.
Yeah, good. Listen, we're running out of time. It's been such a great conversations, but we're going to have to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. But I'd like to give everybody an opportunity, particularly our seasoned aviation industry veterans, to give some closing comments directed at our young aviation professionals and those that are interested in it. I'll start with you, Stephen.
Well, I think we've already alluded to it. Aviation is an immensely human endeavor. As it's already been mentioned, the first astronauts were animals. Anybody can fly them. It takes a real human being to work with others to get things done. Even the Wright brothers had help in the beginning. It is not a solo occupation. You need to ask questions. You need to respect everybody that you're coming in contact with. Now, some folks will be doing the best they ever can. You also see that some folks, this is their starting point. They might be slinging bags now, but they're going to be managing cargo services in 5 years or 7 years. People have enormous potential until you get out there working shoulder to shoulder. And after a little while, you'll see people grow. Yourself, others, they all have potential. They all have growth. And you ask questions, you'll get a lifetime of experience back. And when I got hired in the airlines, I'd get on a new piece of equipment. I'd ask the captain, what have your engine problems been? And in 30 seconds, I got 20,000 hours of experience handed to me just for simply asking a question. So communication is key. One real quick technical point. If someone invites you to the interview, relax. You've got the experience they need. Now they're looking at the person. They are looking at the person. They are not going to waste time calling an unqualified person to the interview. So relax and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy the choices.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Tamara?
I'm with Stephen. Ask questions, talk to everyone, talk to every crew position, be yourself, but be confident and proud, attention to detail, and keep learning. Set yourself apart. That's the best way.
Thank you. And Zane?
Yeah, I'll echo the same as learn your craft, whether it's piloting or maintenance or those things, and then keep your options open. The aviation, for you young people out there, aviation is so full of opportunities in a vast array of jobs. I had dinner last night with a fella that went in the military right out of high school. We got out, and then he went to work for a major cargo carrier on the ramp, handling baggage, went back to college, got a law degree, and had a career with that same cargo airline as an attorney, as a business attorney. So there was an opportunity that a lot of people may never have thought about, that it was in aviation, but it had nothing to do with flying or maintaining airplanes. It was as an attorney. So broaden your horizons, keep your eyes open, learn your craft, and have a great time.
Wow, you guys have said it all. I'll just cap it off with saying I always make the recommendation that with whatever aviation job you get an opportunity with at whatever level, always make yourself available. The person that says yes when it's a difficult assignment or an assignment at an odd time at 3 o'clock in the morning or last minute or things like that says yes, then the head of that operation always thinks of that person first. And they're also going to think of that person when they're promoting people or giving them special assignments and things like that. They're going to think of the person that said yes, not the one that said, well, not this time. So you might want to keep that in mind, because I think that's a big plus for your career. This has been a great conversation. We could have gone a lot longer, but time has done what it's done to us. So I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank everyone for being on the program. Stephen, thank you. You were a bit of a last minute ad, and I appreciate that. Have fun with your 777 flying for another couple of months. Zane, a wealth of information, and of course you and I know each other from the National Business Aviation Association and your intricate involvement with them and that type of thing. So thank you for sharing all your expertise. Tamara, you and I go back, met on a Southwest Airlines flight, and then on our way, both of us on the way to an NBAA convention, and have been friends ever since. And thank you again for providing Air Force One M&Ms for my daughters. They used to get a kick out of that back in the day. So, but no, it's been great. And you brought a wealth of information to this conversation too, and you're still doing some great things long after your retirement from the Air Force. So that's pretty impressive in itself. And for the young crew, you guys are doing some amazing things. Jan, you're well on your way, and really seem to have a handle on the industry and what to do with it and that type of thing. So wish you well with Delta and on and above that. Matthew and Otto, you guys are finishing up your training in your school and figuring out your next path. But it's clear to me that you guys are going to do well. So again, thank you all for being on the program. Again, this is on behalf of the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation, All Things Aviation. And one of the big initiatives that we do in conjunction with the Citation Jet Pilots Association is provide scholarships for aviation-specific scholarships for the education and furthering of the careers in aviation. And we like to continue doing that and appreciate everybody's support with regard to that. So we thank you and look forward to seeing you guys on the next program next Thursday. Everybody have a good one and take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Vince.